It does not have a good reputation. The strategies that they were using are very taboo and things that we would frown upon now. But it's
Like
definitely,
what?
they used to, for example, sit a child in a chair, have maybe like M&Ms ready. If they're teaching a child to say something, have them say it, feed them an M&M. Say it, feed them an M&M.
They're treating the kid like a dog.
Exactly. So I'm trying to change that.
You guys aren't going to change me. Like, this is just who I am. Is that true?
I wouldn't say that a certain behavior can never be changed. Looking at changing a behavior is key, or you're not going to take that step to make a change.
What are the hardest habits that you found difficult to break?
The hardest habits would be...
Does money affect people's behavior?
That's a really tough question.
How much do our peers influence our behavior?
Especially with kids, imitation is something we see all the time. A child might say like, oh, my peer is flopping to the floor and screaming and crying. I'm gonna try that because I saw someone else do it.
Because you are in the field, you understand these concepts. Do you still feel like it's difficult for you to build and break habits, or is it a little easier?
It's still hard. I would say I'm even harder on myself when it comes to, my own habits. I don't work hard enough finding my own motivators.
Why is that?
And I'm not ready to have that conversation yet.
Why wouldn't someone want to have that conversation with themselves?
No one's ever asked me that.
If you're listening to this, you probably know that without your habits and your behavior being in the right place, that means that the results that you're producing are not where you want them to be. And that's why Enass is here to explain to us how our behavior is impacted, what impacts it, what should we look for if we want to change a specific behavior, if we want to break a specific habit. She also dives into her specialty, which is early intervention for kids with autism, what they go through, what are some red flags to look for in your child's development that should let you spark the question, is there's something that is unusual with my child, and should I seek help? If you're not subscribed yet, the best way to support the channel that's completely free is to hit the subscribe button, like the video, comment your thoughts. I hope you guys find enormous value in this conversation with Enass. And with that being said, let's get the show started.
Welcome aboard Middle East Airlines.
والمتوجهة إلى
طيران الشرق الأوسط يرحب
مدينة القدس العربية.
Enass, if you were to describe yourself or introduce yourself in the way that you see yourself, how would that description go?
I like this question. I see myself as a strong, confident, smart woman. I'm a daughter, a sister, and a wife. I'm a business owner, which I'm so happy to be able to say that like out loud, which is something that I've always wanted to be.
How far ago do you think you had the idea of you wanting to be a business owner?
I think it goes back to when I was actually much younger. I knew that my parents came here from Lebanon, and I knew that they came here, land of opportunity to give us, a chance to make something of ourselves. So I knew from a young age, like I had in mind, like I want to have, something that, my family can call our own. And I wanted to work my way up there. I had no idea what that business was going to be, but I always knew I wanted something that we can say, this is what our family started.
Do you think that's important, understanding that there is an end goal, but not knowing how to get there, especially in your field? You're into like behavioral science, and you're not going to become a business owner if the behaviors leading up to that weren't proper.
Absolutely. When we look at behavior, if we're looking at what we want to achieve, you first start with what's your end goal. And then you think about what am I going to do? What are the steps that I need to get there? So absolutely, starting from the end goal is typically like our first step.
Why do you think understanding behavior is important?
Understanding behavior is important because we want to know why someone does what they do. And in my field, especially because I work with kids, we need to know, like, what is this person trying to tell us? Typically, the child might be wanting to tell us something and they're not able to communicate it appropriately. And that's where we come in. We need to figure out, what is this child trying to tell us? What is this person trying to tell us? And how can we teach them the appropriate way to say it or the appropriate way to communicate it so that they don't have trouble with it in the future?
You're almost decoding an unknown language then. You're trying to find that bridge between what they're trying to tell you and why they're doing the things that they're doing.
Absolutely. We say, I like to say, behavior is communication. It truly is, like, someone's trying to tell you something and just not finding the words, not finding even the sign language, not knowing how to tell you exactly what they want. And, they might try a certain behavior and see, could this get me to where I want? And depending on the response is when we get to learned behaviors.
Is there any prerequisites to understanding behavior?
I don't think so. I think when you want to understand behavior, so let me start like this. There are 4 functions for behavior, 4 functions that maintain behavior. One of the functions is attention. The other is escape or avoidance. The third is sensory, or like automatic. And the 4th is access to tangibles. So when you're looking at behavior, you're trying to figure out which one of these functions is maintaining that behavior.
Can you break them down one by one?
Yeah, absolutely. So attention is, this behavior is happening because I want attention. I'm trying to get someone's attention. I'm trying to tell someone something and not knowing how. Escape or avoidance is I'm trying to escape or avoid an unpleasant task or activity. And it might not be unpleasant for everyone else. It's unpleasant for me. Access to tangibles is I want something and I'm not knowing how to communicate what I want. So I'm trying certain behaviors to get to what I want. Or these behaviors to myself. Anytime I've engaged in these behaviors, I've gotten to my end goal. So I've learned that when I engage in these behaviors, I'm getting access to what I want. And then sensory or automatic could be anything that provides that, like, sensory stimulation that someone might be looking for. So for example, when I sit, sometimes, I rock my leg a lot. That's offering me or providing me with the sensory input that I'm seeking, because it helps me think sometimes when I rock my foot. Sometimes someone might, tap their fingers. That's also a sensory, a behavior that they do that's maintained by sensory stimulation.
Are these actions consequences of behavior, or are they your intention behind your behavior?
It's a very good question. It's the intention behind your behavior. The consequences of what's around you is what's going to either reinforce or punish that behavior for you in the future. It's going to be, like, based on how responses are around you. Going back to, again, the consequence, it's going to be your deciding factor in, is this behavior getting me what I want? Or, like, is this behavior getting me to my end goal? Or do I need to try something else? Okay.
So because when you said the sensory, that sounded like a consequence. Like, because, like, this will soothe me, then so it means that in this second I'm uncomfortable. So the consequence is me doing this. But you're saying that the intention is to get to that and
the intention is I'm trying to regulate myself. I'm uncomfortable. My intention is regulating myself. So I tap my fingers and I realize this helps me with regulating myself.
Interesting.
So the end goal was, like, regulation or comfort.
Okay. A lot of people say that this is just the way I am. I can't change, especially when it comes to the more negative behaviors that they do. Whether it's they get really angry or abusive verbally, or whatever it is, that's just who I am. Enass, I can't change now. Like, I'm 30, 35, 40. We hear this maybe a lot with the older generation as well. when they start getting older, like, you guys aren't going to change me. Like, this is just who I am. Is that true?
To a certain extent. Now, I wouldn't say that a certain behavior can never be changed. You have to look at how long has this been reinforced, so the learned behavior behind it. How long has it been reinforced, one, and two, do you have enough motivation to change it?
Okay.
Now, when looking at changing a behavior, motivation is key. You have to find the right motivation, or you're not going to take that step to make a change.
Interesting. So if someone has anger issues, you know, maybe when they get angry, they feel like they have to break something. What would be the primary motivator for someone like that? And how can you help someone that is in that state of anger find a motivator? Because in that moment, the person does not want to engage with, they just want to like release that tension that they have.
Yeah. And I hear that a lot. There are so many people that have that like built up tension and not knowing how to release it. And that's actually the first question that they should ask themselves is, first off, like, what got me to this point? And then, like, how can I appropriately release this? Instead of, getting angry or, breaking something, where can I appropriately put all of this tension into so that it's an appropriate outlet? So the motivation for that person could be, like, first of all, why do they want to change that about themselves? And I'm sure they don't want to be breaking things all the time. So then they can sit down and figure out, like, okay, I don't want to break things. So, I get angry often. I want to break things often. What can I do instead so that I'm not breaking things? And then their goal is to find an appropriate outlet.
Are people usually successful at finding motivators? It feels like it's difficult. It needs a lot of like self-reflection. Like, I really have to sit with myself.
Definitely needs a lot of self-reflection, because my motivator could be completely different than yours, than like the neighbor, than the person upstairs. Every single person has different motivators. And that's like the first step too, is figuring out what the motivator is. And in my line of work, we have to trial things very, very often, because what works for one person might not work for the next and the next and the next and so on.
What usually is the differentiator in the motivators? Why would my motivator be different than yours?
I think it just goes back to every individual being different. What might comfort me might not be what comforts you. What makes me angry might not be what makes you angry, and so on. So I think it just, every person truly is different.
I mean, if we think about behavior, like from a bird's eye view, it's really like, let me think about what I do during the day. It's what are the habits that I built? And for the most part, I feel like that's like a very big chunk of my behavior, just the habits. How important are habits to building proper behavior?
Habits are important because you want to figure out what's reinforcing for you. For example, let's look at the simple habit of going to the gym. You want to find the proper motivator to help you build that habit. So you might figure out, like, what's my reason for going to the gym? Maybe I want to lose weight. Maybe I want to, become stronger. And then in order to build that habit, we need to break down that step even smaller. So if I want to build the habit of going to the gym, what's the first step? Maybe it's leaving the house and driving there. The next step is actually working out. The step after that, if I want to get stronger, it's, breaking down even smaller steps to lifting weights, for example. So if I want to lift weights and become stronger and stronger, maybe my goal might be, let's lift 20 pounds. Then my next goal will be 25 pounds. But how do we make it a habit is by making sure that it's reinforcing enough. So once you break the habit down into what the small steps are and you figure out what needs to be reinforced, that's how you truly get to the end goal, which is the habit that you're trying to create. So when we're looking at reinforcement strategies, you're looking at, okay, going to the gym. Once you get to the gym, you have to find a way to reinforce yourself. That's the first step. The second step is working out and maybe doing that weightlifting, like we said. So now you're lifting 20 pounds. Once you've mastered lifting 20 pounds, find a way to reinforce that. And reinforcers, going back to, again, that's individualized. What might be reinforcing for you might not be what's reinforcing for me, and vice versa. So it has to be something that's going to reinforce me to continue doing this every day to make it a habit.
Are you familiar with the book Atomic Habits?
I am.
So when I was reading that book, at that time, I always said I need to get motivated to go to the gym. But then reading the book, I realized that I really didn't have to like pinpoint a motivator. It gave like this one advice in the book made me almost never want to skip going to the gym. It's like build the environment that you're in to where it's difficult not to go to the gym. So for example, if I used to think like, what's the hardest part in going to the gym? Okay, I got to wake up early because that's the only time I can go to the gym. And I have to get ready, prep the bag, and go. That's like the hardest part was getting in the car to go. So he gave this example of try to prep your clothes a day before, put them with your shoes next to your bed. That way, the first thing you do when you wake up, don't even think about it. Get out of the bed, put them on, and get out of the house. And that doesn't, like, for sure, I do need a little bit of motivation to do that, but I just removed many obstacles, and I just saved 30 minutes of me looking for clothes while I'm sleeping in the morning rather than 5 minutes before I go to sleep while I'm energized, or I can do this real quick. That doesn't really seem like I have a motivator to do that. It just seems like I just made the environment easier. What do you think about that?
So what you just described there is your proactive strategy. So your end goal again is I don't want to skip the gym. I want to go as often as I can. So you thought of what idea you need to help you get there, to make it easier to get there so that it's easier to leave the house, like you said. And your proactive strategy was, let me prep my bag, make sure that it's ready so that makes it easier leaving the house. Those proactive strategies often are also very individualized and also depend on, again, what behavior you're looking at. So for you, it was, how can I make it easier for me to leave the house? The proactive strategy was prepping the bag. We use proactive and consequence strategies as well when we're putting together intervention plans for each individual based on their behaviors. So you just explained a proactive strategy. I can kind of talk to you a little bit about like a consequence strategy. So your behavior, let's say we're looking at the behavior of
Smoking cigarettes, maybe?
Maybe smoking cigarettes, and the habit that you want to break. So, for example, a consequence strategy of someone who wants to quit smoking cigarettes and, it's so hard, let's say they smoke 5 cigarettes a day. A consequence strategy could be if they smoked a cigarette, consequence strategies typically come after the behavior happens. So it's looking at the behavior again of smoking cigarettes, what it could be the consequence strategy to help us decrease that. And it could be, hey, I realized I lit up the cigarette. I know that I want to quit and I'm thinking about it while I'm smoking the cigarette. My consequence strategy is let's put the cigarette out early, get rid of the rest of the cigarettes that I have with me so that I don't go back to smoking that cigarette.
Interesting. So I have a pack of cigarettes. I go to smoke the first one. While I'm smoking it, I discard it early with all the cigarettes that I have.
If that's what you're thinking of, and again, I think it's harder too when we're trying to intervene for our own behaviors. I can give you an example too of how I would intervene for someone else. But if we're trying to intervene for our own behaviors, yes. If you're, smoking the cigarette, you're thinking like, why did I just light this up? I really want to quit. Your consequence strategy should be, let me put it out early. I shouldn't finish it and get rid of whatever I have left so I don't have that, thought of smoking another one. And I'm not saying that that's going to, have this person quit smoking cigarettes completely, but that could be a step every time, they light up a cigarette. Now they're getting closer to their goal. Now, instead of smoking the 5 cigarettes a day, okay, I'm getting a few puffs in, which is relieving, the urge that I have that, I really, really want to smoke a cigarette, but I'm smoking less and less and less until I get to my goal.
Okay. So you kind of make it harder on yourself.
Yeah.
What do you think about people that shame themselves out of an action? So, for example, let's take smoking cigarettes again. You're smoking a cigarette and then you start speaking to yourself in an ill way. Or let's say you don't go to the gym and you start saying, that's why you're fat. That's why you're disgusting. Look at yourself in the mirror. You're worthless, stuff like that. And sometimes for some people, that lets them get out of the habit because they don't want to be those words that they just described themselves in. Is that healthy?
I don't think it's healthy to tell yourself, like, that's nasty or that's disgusting. But I definitely think it's healthy to pinpoint what you want to change and then find a positive way to make that change. So going back to reinforcers and punishers and motivation. So for that person who might be like looking in the mirror, wanting to go to the gym, or that person that's smoking cigarettes saying like that this is disgusting, I shouldn't be doing this. Their motivator again is, I don't want to be like this. I don't want to stay like this forever. I want to make that change. And then it has to be motivating enough for them. Maybe that truly isn't motivating enough. Maybe someone thinking like, this is gross, I really should stop it, isn't motivating enough. But looking at it a little deeper, like, this is gross. My significant other, probably thinks my breath stinks from smoking cigarettes. Or, I don't want my kids to get into this habit growing up, so I really should stop and like quit for them. That could be a motivator that might be, stronger and more reinforcing for that person to start.
Do people seek help? Like they go to professionals to stop these actions?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And a lot of therapists, I think that, depending on what the case is, they look into reinforcement and punishment strategies. And they help the individual figure out what is your end goal and how do you want to get there. Let's work on it together and let's find out what can be reinforcing for you so that we can increase that desired behavior, the behavior you want to see, the habit you want to build, and decrease or get rid of the habit you want to break.
I mean, it seems like from a lot of the things you're saying, there's a lot of similarities between what you do and what a therapist does.
I think so.
What's the difference?
So, technically, there's a lot of differences, I think. I think our mindset is very similar. I think, we studied the same strategies, but I think the way BCBA, so myself, the way we intervene is very much more hands-on versus I think like a therapist, it's more, I can help you define, what you want to change, what you feel like you should change, but it's going to be more on you. Whereas for me, kind of like I mentioned earlier, like I have to help intervene to get the individual to their goal.
Okay. So I'm guessing that there are some scenarios where you work hand in hand with therapists, no?
Yeah. There are a few cases that I've had where we worked hand in hand with therapists, even speech therapists, occupational therapists as well, in addition to like psychologists, to try and get the child to the end goal that we want.
What are the hardest habits that you found difficult to break?
The hardest habits would be those that have multiple steps or those that have been reinforced for so long. So again, going back to, let's say smoking. Someone who's smoked for 20, 30 years isn't just going to wake up one day and say, I want to quit and I'm, going to be able to quit next week. That's a habit that you need to slowly decrease, going from, someone who smokes a pack a day to maybe smoking 10 cigarettes a day and then, continue to gradually decrease until you reach your end goal. Those would typically be the hardest habits to break.
So it's not like a specific habit that's difficult to break. It depends on how long have you been doing it, Okay.
The learned behavior behind it. What was so reinforcing about it that you continued to do it? And when it comes to like the reinforcer, what are you going to replace that with to ensure that you don't go back to the habit you're trying to break? You know, you have to find a replacement for it.
It looks like also like in those situations, someone that smokes 3 packs a day can't stop overnight. So like part of the journey is if someone wants to stop smoking, they don't have to stop right away.
Right.
It's just decreasing, like an exponential decrease.
Right. To be honest, I think those that might, you know, put in mind, like, I just want to stop tomorrow and be done, are setting themselves up for failure. Like, you have to be realistic about your goal, and gradually decrease. And, you know, we say every small win is a win. So if you go from 3 packs a day to 2.5, hey, that's, you know, you've made like a gradual step towards your goal. Reinforce yourself for that. You know, maybe every time you decrease on those cigarettes, your replacement is going out for ice cream, or, you know, having the dessert that you typically don't have only on special occasions. You know, reward yourself.
Yeah. Interesting. How much do our peers influence our behavior?
I think very much. I think as human beings, we often, you know, as much as we try to say it doesn't affect us, I think everything around us affects our behavior. If, you know, the entire crowd around us likes this specific cake, let's say, I want to try that cake. If everyone around us is wearing these newest shoes, I want to wear those shoes. If everyone around us is, when they're, you know, trying to break a habit, for example, if they're taking the first step as, you know, let's go to the gym. I want to go to the gym too. I want to start that habit. I think it truly is defining factor in, you know, who we are as well. You are who you surround yourself with. You are who your friends are.
And do you see that in your line of work?
I do. We often, you know, especially with kids, imitation is, you know, something we see all the time. A child might say like, oh, you know, this, you know, my peer is, you know, flopping to the floor and screaming and crying. I'm going to try that. I want this new toy and I really want to play with it. I'm going to try flopping to the floor and screaming and crying because I saw someone else do it.
Because you are in the field and because you understand these concepts, do you still feel like it's difficult for you to build and break habits, or is it a little easier?
I think it's so much easier for me to define what habits I want to break, and figure out what the steps are that I need to get there, but it's still hard. It's definitely still hard.
Because people might look at you and be like, okay, Enass knows what to do. Like she's been around enough people that have hard habits to break. She's helped people break and build habits. She should have this down to a science. Is it not like that?
It's definitely not like that. It's I would say I'm even harder on myself when it comes to, you know, my own habits that I want to break. I don't work hard enough finding my own motivators to do things that I want to do. So I definitely think it's not like that at all.
Why is that?
Maybe because I know like what the answer is, and I know if I wanted to, you know, I could, and I need that extra effort, but I choose to use that time for something else versus, you know, focusing on what I want to change.
Is that the avoidance that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
Interesting. So because you know the answer and you know if you really dig deep enough you'll find it, you'd rather just not look because then there's a conversation with yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not ready to have that conversation yet.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. No one's ever asked me that.
Because why wouldn't someone want to have that conversation with themselves?
I think it goes back to, it truly is hard work. it takes a lot of effort, and there is a lot of steps that are involved in making that change. You know, for lack of a better word, there's some laziness involved, and just taking the easy way out, or maybe not finding it being too big of a problem right now.
Okay. Do you think helping other people on with their behaviors kind of covers up for that a little bit? It's okay, it's fine if I don't do it because I'm really busy helping these people do it.
Yeah.
Is there that conversation as well?
Honestly, as you say that out loud, yeah, I truly feel like that's probably a big factor. It's very, so the work that I do is very tiring. I love it. It's what I chose to do, and no regrets whatsoever. And I want to do this for the rest of my life. But it truly does take a big toll each day. You want to be there and help this person take every step that they can to get to their end goal, and you want to provide that, you know, support and be there. And then by the time like I'm off and home, it's like, okay, I know I want to make these changes for myself, but I'm going to save it for another day. And I continue to push it off, and that's something that I definitely need to work on.
I'm thinking, where do you draw the line for yourself, right? Because like we mentioned earlier, you got to your goal now because of the behaviors you set in place. So now when you want to advance even further, because I'm pretty sure that someone that strived to be a business owner, went through all the hurdles, all the obstacles, and got there, has a lot more to go. They're not going to be content. They want to strive for bigger, better. We're talking a little bit about your center, and I'm just from your tone of voice, you seem like you want to take it to the next level, and taking it to the next level means changing behavior as well, right? So where do you draw the line for yourself of, okay, let me put my behaviors on the back burner for a little bit, and when do you make that decision that, okay, no, let me start working on myself again?
So from a young age, I've always been the type that, like, you know, I set these like challenges for myself, and then once I've met that challenge, or once I've overcome that challenge, okay, what's next? You know, and that's kind of been the way that I've like grown up, you know, getting my bachelor's degree. Okay, I'm bored now, what's next? My master's degree, okay, I'm bored now, what's next? All the way till now, and you're right, like, kind of like I talked a little bit about the center, like, what's next? I think it's probably going to be when I get like bored with like, okay, we've been kind of, you know, stagnant for a while. Like, what can I do now to take it to the next level? But in order to get to the stagnant phase 2, I need to master like where we're at right now and make sure that it's the best version it can be. And I think that's something that, you know, everyone can relate to. You want to first perfect it before you can add on or increase or do more.
Do you think people should be hard on themselves like you are yourself?
I think it's helpful because it definitely lets us strive, you know, to always do better. I don't think that everyone is hard on themselves. Some people are, you know, they're content, kind of like you said, content with what they have or what they do, or, you know, what they offer. But I definitely think it could be beneficial to be hard on yourself, like, because we're always learning. Every day is a new day. Every day is an opportunity to learn something new and to better ourselves. And being harder on ourselves, I think, helps us be better.
Does understanding behavior change between adults and children?
So it's pretty similar. So when you're looking at adults and their behavior, you can kind of break it up to the 4 functions that I mentioned earlier as well. The attention, access, avoidance, and sensory. I can give you an example of like speeding tickets, for example. So, someone who's speeding, the behavior of speeding, they get stopped by a cop gives them a ticket. That ticket is meant to punish their behavior. Now, in the future, is this person going to speed again? That depends. Are they motivated enough so that they don't get a ticket and have to pay a fine or go to court or whatever the situation was for them? Or do they just, ticket is a ticket. I don't mind it. That, behavior of speeding, depending on what the motivator is for the person, will define if they're going to increase or decrease that behavior again in the future. Will they speed again, or will they be more careful? And that's why for some people, speeding tickets don't work, because it doesn't really punish their behavior. They don't care.
Does money affect people's behavior?
Yes, for sure. I think that's a very high motivator for a lot of people. There's a fine line, though, between, getting more money and becoming greedy. And I think that's extremely important. But as long as, a person's thinking about what is motivating enough for me, like, I want to be a business owner one day. Okay, my first step is, okay, let me get a degree. Let me get the education I need. Let me, find a space. Let me find the right employees to get to the point where, okay, now I'm making money. Greed, I think, is what can ruin that for a lot of people.
But I'm not really more people that accumulate a lot of wealth. Like, when after you acquire money, is there any signs of this person's behavior will change after they get money? Because people will say, like, money is the root of all evil, or when you get money, you're going to change, you're going to become a better person, and you're going to maybe stop talking to these friends and see yourself as above that. Have you seen any indicators that you could tell which person will change after they accumulate money or not?
That's a really tough question. To be honest, I think it's really hard to pinpoint indicators like that, because I think when it comes to certain motivators, a lot of people internalize, their feelings about them. Someone might not, say out loud, like, oh, I want to make more money, or I want to be more successful. So it's hard to figure out if their behavior has changed or if they will change once they have more money or become more successful.
Because I'm thinking about the example that you gave about the speeding ticket. If I'm driving down the street and I got a ticket, maybe next time, and let's just say the ticket was $200. I'm like, okay, no, I got to avoid the $200 next time. Time after time, I'm going to stop being able to afford it. There's more important stuff. But if I have a lot of money, then like you said, okay, give me the ticket. I'm just going to pay the ticket. And as much times as you give me the ticket, the consequence won't affect me, because I can just pay it off every single time. I got points. I'll go to court. I'll keep paying, and it won't change.
Right. Now, look at the reason why are you speeding? Do you want to get to your destination faster? Do you want to get to work so that you're not late? That's where we figure out the function of the behavior. So you said, you used the word avoid, but you said, do I want to avoid a ticket? I really don't care. But your speeding might be because you want to avoid maybe getting in trouble by your boss, or maybe you want to avoid, let's say you're speeding to get to the gym because you're signed up for a class and you don't want to be late. You're trying to avoid being late for your class. So that is the function of your behavior, and the consequence might change that. So it might change the way maybe you now leave the house earlier so that you're not having to speed, and you're not getting a speeding ticket, and you're not having to get to your destination late. I think money definitely is a motivator for certain people. Like you said, those who might not have enough money or I don't want to say not have enough money, but those where money is a factor, or they might think, why should I pay my money to the city? I don't want to have to go through with that. I should really pay more attention to, not speed while I'm driving. So I definitely think money can be a motivator for both, like wanting to do more to get more money, or wanting to keep that money so that they don't have to pay a speeding ticket.
I was thinking more about carelessness. If someone, the speed limit's 25 and they drove 40, it's because, they're careless. It's when you're going 25, you feel the car is too slow. It's empty. I can just, hit gas and take that example on other examples where you might have money and you're just careless. You might go to a fancy restaurant, order a lot of food, a lot of it gets thrown away. It's not, you just become that type of person that is careless.
Yeah.
I think that's what a lot of people are scared of when I think, okay, someone has a lot of money. Okay, how is that person like? It's almost nowadays when you see a person that has a lot of money and is very generous and is very kind and is very humble, people look at that and like, oh my God, like I want to have money like that, because you're so used to these people that have money now that, let's say, their behaviors are very careless, very egotistical, and people want to avoid that. And I think that's where like people's negative connotation with money came from.
I agree.
Rather than telling you about how Whoop works, I'm going to actually show you how it works for me. So right here on the screen, you're about to see my metrics for the day. Last night I slept for 4 hours, which isn't good. I was editing Monday's episode. It took some time out of my sleep. On a usual day, if I slept 4 hours without knowing anything else, I would definitely not think that I should go work out. I would say, you know what, let me just sleep in. But in this situation, I opened my Whoop app and it shows me that my body is 35% recovered. I'm in the yellow, which means that my body is able to handle some sort of physical activity. I went to the gym. Where the white dashes are is where Whoop is telling me my optimal range of pushing myself should be, my strain. Here I went a little overboard just because on days like this, I'd rather go a little overboard and then sleep a little earlier and hopefully wake up tomorrow feeling fantastic. But this is what I mean when I say that this device shows you how to go about your day-to-day. Even if you had what you would call a terrible night's sleep, sometimes your body's more well recovered than you think. And because you're a listener of this podcast, you can actually try this out for yourself for free for a month. You go to join.whoop.com/notfromhere, sign up, try Whoop out for a month, see how much it's going to change the way you live your life and go about your fitness journey. And I guarantee that you won't be able to take it off, just like how I can't take it off. And now, back to the episode. When you mention kids, and you mention having a center for early intervention, a lot of people are listening right now, they have kids, and they want to know what are some signs that should maybe worry them a little bit. So what are some red flags that you see in children's development that people should be aware of?
So children should develop appropriate ways to communicate. When I said like behaviorist communication, you want to look at, I get a lot of questions from parents like, why is my child, engaging in such a heavy tantrum? Like, I don't know what they want. And then when I go and I pick them up, usually that helps calm them down. You want to look at, what do you think your child was telling you in that moment that they're crying or engaging in that tantrum? What exactly happened, like right before that behavior that caused them to engage in that? We do a lot of ABC recording, or we do ABC, I'm sorry, I'm like blanking on my words. So ABC is antecedent behavior consequence. So when we want to study a behavior, figure out why a child is engaging in a certain behavior that they're engaging in, or any individual really, you look at their behavior, and then what happened before the behavior is the A, which is the antecedent. What happened after the behavior is the C, which is the consequence. So for parents who have questions about like, okay, what should I be looking for? What's the behavior that, is worrying you? Is there any behavior that's worrying you? And then I want you to think about what exactly happened right before that behavior. And then what did you do right after? Or what happened right after? What was the consequence right after? And then you can, from there, figure out, is my child, understanding or developing the appropriate ways to communicate with me? Or is there something that I need to do for them? Now, I primarily work with autistic kids. However, this is something that any individual can look for. And I'm not saying this is a red flag, which means a child is autistic, but this just means, has my child, developed that appropriate communication style with me, or do I need to help teach them the appropriate style? So going back to the example of the child tantruming and, the mom went over and picked them up, what happened right before? Maybe the child really wanted to watch Miss Rachel on TV, but they don't know how to tell mom that. But when mom came over and picked them up, they were like, okay, I'm fine with this right now. That becomes a pattern. The child starts screaming and crying now every time they want mom to pick them up, but they don't know how to tell mom, hey, pick me up. It becomes a learned behavior. Like the child knows, when I screamed and cried or when I threw a tantrum last time, mom came over and picked me up. Now the mom is unintentionally reinforcing that behavior, making that a habit. And that is when like parents come to me and tell me, hey, this is what keeps happening. How can I get it to stop? Well, you need to figure out, what's the consequence strategy that you're using with that. When that child's screaming and crying, are you trying to figure out what they want and teaching them the appropriate way to communicate that? Or are you just picking them up and that, they're content with that? That makes them happy. That's what they want. They're never going to learn to request, for their mom to pick them up or, simply say up using their words if we don't teach them the appropriate way to communicate that. And that can be, the strategy that we use for any behavior, really. And parents at home can, sit down and think, what is a behavior that we think is inappropriate for our child, and how can we teach them the appropriate way to communicate with us? Going back to the functions, how can we teach them the appropriate way to tell us they want attention or they want an item or something's unpleasant to them? So that they don't have to engage in this inappropriate behavior. And
you said it's not necessarily if a child does that, that means they have autism.
Right, correct. That just means that, hey, I learned that, this is how I can communicate. Now, our goal to help, children develop with, their requests is teaching them communication. So communication typically is the easier way out. It's much easier for a child to say, Mom, pick me up or up versus screaming, crying, throwing a tantrum. It takes a lot more energy to scream, cry, and throw a tantrum. So if that truly is what the motivator was, if that's the end goal for the child and it was, I want my mom to pick me up, and we start to teach them the appropriate way and we start to teach them the easier way that they can request that, you're going to see a huge decrease in that behavior. But the main goal for us should be, what is the child's end goal? We need to figure out what it is, because if that's not the case, if the child isn't screaming and crying because they want mom to pick them up, but that's what mom thinks, they might continue to scream and cry, or we might never really know truly what they were trying to communicate with us.
But isn't there like a million things that the kid would want?
Yeah, it could be. But then it's on us to be more aware of what it is, so that, again, we can help that child appropriately communicate it or properly communicate it.
So a lot of trial and error.
Yes.
So that's, for the most part, the red flag is when there's an action that keeps happening and you don't know why it's happening, but it just keeps happening.
Yes, the miscommunication is the red flag, not knowing the why behind it. So that if, that parent wants to figure out what why is this behavior happening? They can take that ABC data kind of that I was telling you. B stands for behavior. So write down what the behavior is, whether if the behavior is a tantrum, if the behavior is, flopping to the ground or whatever the case is, that's their B. What happened right before it and then what happened right after it. And then they can figure out what is maintaining that behavior. Is it the attention, the avoidance, the access to tangibles, or is it like a sensory thing? And then that's when you figure out what's the appropriate way to handle the situation and how do we teach the child so that we can help them develop the skills they need so this doesn't happen again in the future, or we decrease this from happening in the future.
How would you describe or define autism?
So autism is a spectrum disorder, and it affects an individual's social, communication, and or cognitive development. It's different in every individual, and
But
that's
like
why they call it a
simpler than
spectrum disorder.
Like a simpler, also
A simpler explanation. So someone with autism might not be able to understand or identify social cues. They might not be able to communicate their wants and needs effectively. They might not be able to, develop the skills that they need at a young age, and due to that, not being able to develop like the prereq skills, for example, that they need from 0 to 18 months, then they're behind on the skills that they need or that they should have after. And it affects every individual differently, which is why they call it a spectrum disorder. Every single individual with autism has different skills. There are many people that I know with autism that you wouldn't even be able to tell that they have autism. And then there are others who have, larger deficits in those skills.
Okay. When approximately would you be able to identify if a child has autism?
Typically, whenever I sit down with a parent, the first thing they tell me is, I knew something was wrong. I knew something was different, especially if they've had other children before. Typically, they can tell at a younger age. I've had parents tell me at like 10 months they were able to know. Technically speaking, though, an evaluation isn't done by a psychologist until the child is at least 18 months old. So when a toddler or when a child is an infant, for example, some of the things you can look into is eye contact, babbling. Is the child, trying to speak to me by babbling and, making baby sounds? When they get to an age where they start making eye contact with you, are they responding to their name? Those are like the first signs that I would recommend for a parent to look for. And if they're not there, work on building those to see, is it autism or is it just, my child hasn't learned that skill yet.
Okay. Part of the definition, you said a disorder. Is it curable?
It's not curable. I do get a lot of parents that ask me, is it curable? Or can my child be cured? And it isn't truly curable. However, there are so many resources now that we can help support the child and help them build the skills that they need so that they can live, a typical, fulfilling life. And it's 2025. Honestly, there's so many resources for parents now that, I try to tell them that. I try to tell them, like, the first step was getting help, getting into therapy. And now it's, let us help you get all the support you need to get your child to where they need to be. Going back to it being a spectrum disorder, so, some kids, based on where their skill set is or their development is, they may not get to the end goal we want them to get to. Some kids graduate from ABA therapy, so they don't need therapy even though they have autism. And a lot of parents ask me, if my child graduates, do they have to have the autism diagnosis follow them? And I tell parents, like, it's up to you. If you feel like your child does not need any more support and you feel like you wouldn't want to mention it to anyone, then, that's between you and yourself. However, because it's 2025 and autism has, truly, it's everywhere now. Everyone's hearing about it. People are more educated on it. The support and resources that there are available for individuals are everywhere. Even in schools now, and even in general ed classrooms, they have parapros to help with the kids in class.
What are parapros?
Parapros are like teachers' assistants or teachers' aides that are there specifically for specific children. So if a child, for example, maybe it takes them a little longer, because of the cognitive disability or deficit, maybe it takes them a little longer to complete a worksheet. Or maybe they need multiple breaks throughout their classroom session. The parapro is there to help provide them with that support, because a break isn't a bad thing. If you're able to identify that you need a break and you need to step away for a minute and come back, the classroom might need a parapro to help provide that. But there's definitely so many resources now that it's okay that it's not a curable, disorder.
Yeah.
It's absolutely okay. I wish every parent knew that, your child will be okay.
Like, let's just say the spectrum's 1 to 10, just for the sake of the example. If a child's at an 8, what's best case scenario for him? To go down to a 4, is that looked like as a massive accomplishment? Or when he graduates, should he be at a 2? How do you define the spectrum, or
define when someone would be ready to graduate,
exactly.
For example. So we define that by, helping the child get to a point where they're independent in their communication, their social skills, and their cognitive abilities. Now, that for someone might look like, maybe the child now knows how to use the bathroom all on their own. They know how to prep their food on their own for lunchtime. They know how to tell us what they want, what they need. For someone else, that might look like, I'm able to go from an 8 to, hey, now I can tell you when I need to go to the bathroom. You can help me get there. Especially for kids where maybe their social skills are their highest deficit, because it's a spectrum disorder. Maybe their cognitive abilities are perfectly there. Maybe they don't have any, communication deficits, but maybe their social skills are where the deficits are. Our goal is, what do we need to teach them to get them into a general ed classroom so that they're surrounded by peers to help build on those social skills.
Okay.
So for every child, that truly does look different.
Do we know where autism comes from? Because you're saying some moms at 10 months says that she knew that the child had autism. Does that mean the parents did anything wrong in these 10 months? Or where does it come from usually?
I don't think any parent is ever to blame for that, of course. To be honest with you, we're at a point where research isn't far enough to know where it comes from. Not my beliefs, but there are a lot of psychologists or doctors that say it comes from vaccines. There's people that say it comes from environmental factors. There's not enough research yet to know exactly where it comes from.
What do you think?
That's a really tough question. To be honest, I think it is likely from environmental factors. I think it could be from the food we eat, to be honest with you, which I know is horrible to say, but from the research that I've done, there truly isn't a single factor that is the reason for the cause of autism.
How much do you think the food we eat is affecting our children? And behavior in general. It doesn't have to be just autism.
Yeah.
I'm not saying just for the children with autism, that's the issue. I think now we hear a lot about ADHD, for example, and stuff like that. And a lot of times it's becoming related to the food.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what have you seen?
I definitely see that food truly is a big factor in energy levels. And, when a child has a lot of sugar, they're a lot harder to, follow directions. It's a lot harder to, have them, able to regulate themselves. They might get very overstimulated very easily. I think in certain foods too that have all the negative things that we don't want in our food, the red dye or the RD40 and all of that. I haven't specifically done research on it, so I wouldn't be able to tell you, but I truly think that those play a big factor in child's behavior.
Do you communicate that with the parents if you realize that? Maybe do you start with the food at some point during therapy?
That's it's definitely a conversation that I will have with parents if I feel like nutrition might be, a factor in certain behavior. I don't think that nutrition is the cause of autism or, where someone is on the spectrum, but that is a conversation that I can have with parents with recommendations that I think would be, better for them throughout their day to help with regulation, to help with not getting overstimulated, to help with keeping them on task. But at the end of the day, that's truly beyond my scope, and it would be something that a nutritionist would need to talk to them about.
Okay. What do you talk to them about?
So I talk to parents about reinforcement and punishment strategies. We typically use reinforcement strategies a lot more in ABA. I talk to them about the interventions that we use in our center and how they can use them in home. Any skill that we're trying to teach, any goal that we're trying to reach is not truly learned by the learner unless it's generalized into other environments. So if I'm trying to teach a child to learn to request, "Mom, pick me up," if that only happens at home, if the child learns, I can request, from mom to pick me up, but at the center, when they want someone to pick them up, they're screaming and crying and throwing that tantrum. They haven't generalized that skill, so they haven't truly learned how to appropriately communicate that want. So we find the interventions, going through that trial and error that we talked about, figuring out what's reinforcing enough, what's motivating enough, what's helpful to increase the desired behaviors and decrease the undesired behaviors. And then once we know for sure this is what works, we teach parents how to use these interventions at home. And then once that's generalized to the home setting and it's generalized across people as well, so the child knows that they could do it with me, with their behavior technician, with their mom, hopefully it also generalizes into the school, that's when we can say the skill truly is learned.
Okay. What does ABA mean?
ABA is applied behavior analysis, and that's the therapy. It's the best known, effective, research-based, evidence-backed therapy for the treatment of autism.
What makes it so special?
Using the proactive strategies, the consequence strategies to reinforce and punish behaviors. It's the most effective.
I'm wondering how they got to that, early on when people started catching on to autism.
Yeah.
And how to make it better on these kids. What's the process to getting to a system like ABA?
ABA is it does not have a good reputation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. When they first started ABA therapy, it was very different than where it's at now. Kind of like you said, they had to figure out, a system of how to help these kids, and the strategies that they were using are very taboo and things that we would frown upon now. We would never think of doing. But it's definitely... What? So, because we've talked about it now, I bet you all of your social media is going to be, you're going to go down that rabbit hole and you're going to see all of the old way ABA. They used to, for example, sit a child in a chair, have maybe M&Ms ready. And what they want, if they're teaching a child to say something, have them say it, feed them an M&M. Say it, feed them an M&M. And this way they're reinforcing with the M&Ms the desired behavior. But that's not realistic. It's not something that's very humane.
They're treating the kid like a dog.
Exactly. And it's very, like I said, the reputation is very bad. So I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to get people to understand that ABA therapy is, it truly does wonders. And there's much more natural or naturalistic ways that we can teach children using reinforcement. And
So
punishment
the
procedures.
reputation is still bad till today?
It's still bad. If you look up, I even come across videos where people bash it left and right, but it's truly because they know ABA as that old style of teaching. Now we like,
How old are we talking?
not that long ago. I would say maybe like 40, 50 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe even less than that. Now we're at we have New Age ABA, which like at my center, we do play-based therapy. So everything is in the natural environment. We use the child's motivation, what their interests are, and help build skills off of that. So we use a lot of toys, a lot of, fun group activities, and we're still able to get to that end goal, all while it being fun. And, the kids love to be there. Parents tell me all the time, like, my child is saying, I want to go to Roots on the weekend. And it truly is amazing to see it develop into something so great. And, that is the New Age ABA. Like, I see so many new centers using this type of therapy now.
Okay. What's the other type if ABA is bashed so much?
So the other type, the old style was called DTT, which is discrete trial training. And that was, so they would divide work and play. And work was done at the table and play was away from the table. And it was like you'd sit the child at the table and you teach them what you were trying to teach them, whatever the goal was. Maybe it's even, tacting is labeling. So maybe the child doesn't know how to label certain animals. So you put the pictures in front of them and you teach them to label dog, cat, cow, and then you reinforce them using edible reinforcement. That was like the old way. Or it could have been like any tangible reinforcer. Could have been a toy. You reinforce them at the table. Maybe they get 5-10 seconds of playing with that toy, or maybe they get the M&M, and then you're back to the next goal. And you continue that until it's, okay, break time. Maybe they get 5 minutes away from the table, back to work. And they come back to the table. And this was a very rigid routine for the kids.
This sounds exhausting.
It was exhausting. It was very robotic. And that was a big complaint that parents had. It was like, my child knows how to identify these animals, but why are they saying it in a voice like that? And it's because it was so rigid on the staff too, that it became so monotone. Bear, cow, dog, cat. Okay, moving on. Now, because of like the play-based naturalistic way, we can teach the child to identify animals while we're sitting and playing with the farm toy, for example. We pull out the animals, we teach them what the pig says, what the cow says, what the dog says. And then we move on to like, let's put the barn away, move on to shapes maybe. And it's all while the child's playing, having fun. And it proves to be more effective because it also is easier for the child to generalize it into other environments and across people. So the child who's learning at the table, it's not fun. I don't care to do that when I get home. I don't want to do that. But when a child's learning through, these toys or, whatever the fun activity is through songs, it's so fun.
Yeah.
Parents tell me like when the child goes home, like, oh, did you guys sing this song today? He was singing it at home. Or, the skills are generalizing into the home so much more quickly and it's so much more natural than like that robotic DTT style.
Okay. I want to ask you, when the kids are there, and from what I'm understanding, it's really like a communication thing where you're trying to decode what they're thinking and basically teaching them how to communicate back. But in the early stages, do they just look confused all the time? Because I'm thinking that like they're in the center and you're starting the therapy, whatever. I feel like they would just be confused. Like, what am I doing here? Why are these people? Why is she holding a cow, telling me cow, cow, right?
Yeah. So Definitely. And that happens, it's very typical. It happens maybe the first couple of days, but the way the center is set up, and I think, a lot of centers are set up this way too, it's fun, it's inviting, it's not a place where a child's like coming and like, oh, like I'm here to do stuff. It's like, oh, I'm somewhere that's fun, I'm here to play. And we do something every day, actually all throughout session, which is called pairing. And it's where the technician pairs with the child. And that's when they identify what the motivators are, what the interests are, and they use that to help build connections with the learner. So maybe there's kids that love the alphabet, there's kids that love the animals. So based on which child you're working with, you're using their interests to help them learn the skills that you want them to learn.
Okay. How's the morale of the parents when they know that their child has autism?
So it definitely depends on the parent, but typically it's, parents come to us like needing help. Like, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. I don't want my child to, have this diagnosis. And that's very typical, if you could choose between the two, I'm sure every parent would choose to not have a child with the diagnosis. It's on us to, be empathetic. And I truly, always am very, very empathetic, but also to help the parents realize like, okay, your child has the diagnosis, but that's not the end of the world. Like the world doesn't end here. What can we do now to help your child have a better life? How do we get them to achieve their goals? How do we get them to where you want to be? And also having those realistic conversations where, sometimes a parent might not, like their child might not get to where they want to be. How can we get them to their, utmost potential? And those conversations happen gradually. I actually meet with parents weekly to discuss, progress, programs that we have for the kids and what they can do at home to help them achieve their goals.
Out of the people that I've met so far, maybe one or two people actually said that my child has autism. Why?
I think in our culture, in the Arab culture, I think it's very taboo or frowned upon. I think people feel like if someone knows my child has a diagnosis, they might look at me differently or look at my child differently, like they're not, good enough or, where they should be. For lack of a better term, they're not normal. Like, oh, your child is different. And I think for that reason, a lot of people shy away from, opening up to people about their child being diagnosed. And it actually leads to a lot of very late diagnoses. Like a lot of people are in denial. Like, no, I don't think, there's no way my child has something. There's no way. And it's not until it's a little too late. I don't want to say too late because it's never too late to get therapy, but the child ends up getting a later diagnosis. And going back to what we talked about also earlier in the episode with the learned behavior, that's when we have, a lot of trouble, like having the child unlearn all of the things that they've learned till that day when it comes to behavior. I'm not saying everything, of course, but it leads to a lot of late diagnoses because families are like in denial. They don't want to go, get their child evaluated. And I try to emphasize this to parents as best as I can. Early intervention is key. So the sooner you get the evaluation, the sooner your child can start therapy and get the help that they need, the sooner you'll get them to reach their goals and the better they will be at reaching their goals.
Do parents at least start talking about it after they put their kids in therapy, or even after they put their kids in therapy, they still won't mention it to other people?
I know some families that tell me like, hey, please don't, keep this between us. And of course, for HIPAA reasons, it never goes anywhere else, but they feel the need even to tell me like, hey, I didn't tell anyone, please make sure no one knows. And to me, it's important that the child is getting the therapy. So to me, I tell the parent like, listen, you made the great first step of getting your child diagnosed and then finding the support that they need. And now let us do everything else. Let us, help you and help them get to where they need to be. Let's help them live a fulfilling life. But that's the thing. If parents stay in denial, the child's never going to get the help they need. And even when they do, if they continue to shy away from it, how many resources and opportunities are those parents, holding their child back from? If the school doesn't know that the child has a diagnosis, how is the child going to succeed in class? So many things can, the child can benefit from so many things if the diagnosis is made more public, I guess we can say.
Do people just leave their kids at home? Do they not take them out?
A lot of people tell me, yeah. Like a lot of families literally tell me, like even cousins or aunts and uncles don't know that the child has a diagnosis, and they've never like really interacted with them much to know that something's wrong.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think that that's the biggest disservice we can do for any child is, keeping them from things that you typically do every day. How else would they, learn if they don't go through these experiences or opportunities to learn, kind of what we were talking about, like the appropriate ways to communicate their wants and needs, or the appropriate way to socialize or communicate with others. So I encourage parents, to go through those experiences, even if they might be a little tougher, even if they might be really hard, because that's how, like, your child's not going to know how to go through these experiences until they do.
It's so sad.
Yeah. It truly is.
It's difficult because usually when you think about having children, you think about all these nice moments that you're going to have with them. The first time they're going to say mama or baba, them taking their first steps, you maybe feeding them like food for the first time. You have these moments that everyone thinks of. And when you get that diagnosis, it's like a slap in the face of, you gotta put this stuff on hold for now. And Muna Adawi, do you know Muna?
Yeah, I do.
Muna said this to me on the podcast, and she said that a lot of parents treat it as a death sentence. And I'm just curious to know, what does that mean in terms of like real life behavior? Like, how do they behave to where they're treating it as a death sentence?
As the parents?
Yeah.
So it truly is very like sad. I've heard it from parents too, and it's because, parents tell me as soon as they hear about the diagnosis, the entire life flashes in front of their eyes. Like, okay, is my child ever gonna get married? Is my child ever gonna move out of the house? Are they ever gonna get a degree? Are they gonna be able to go to school? And it's hard because I also don't have those answers. We never know how much a child will progress, until we work on the skills that we need to work on. Some kids, progress so quickly and others don't. And that's just, where the learner's abilities are and their capabilities. And parents are constantly thinking like, okay, is my child ever going to be able to say mama? Are they ever going to be able to, have a full conversation with me? Are we ever going to be able to go sit at a restaurant and have a meal? And I think that's where that mentality of it's a death sentence comes from, because it's like, I'm going to need to be here for my child for the rest of my life. And parents, of course, are always going to be in their children's lives, but parents think of my child growing up, graduating college, getting a job of their own, moving out, getting married, having their own family. But now they're thinking like, I'm going to be there and needing to be there to support my child through what could have been those milestones, and I'll be with them for the rest of my life. And I don't necessarily think when they say it's a death sentence that they're like, oh, what a burden. I think it's, I can't believe I'm going to miss out on all of these things that I wish my child could have gone through, or that I expected my child to go through.
And in addition to that, I'll add one more, and that's something that Yasmin Hamid told me and it was, from her own experience, the parents are scared to die or to, like, something to happen to them.
Yes, because who's going to take care of my child?
Yeah.
Who's going to be there to support them the way that I know I need to, or, you know, help with all of their needs? Yeah, it's definitely, it's tough to think about. I don't have any kids of my own, and I usually, when I have conversations with parents, I like to mention that too, because I like to tell them, like, I know, like, your child has autism, and I know, like, how to help build skills for them. I know how to, try to get them to their goals, but I truly don't know what you go through, because I don't know. I can only imagine, what a parent goes through when they receive that diagnosis.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
The whole, this whole conversation was on, like, behaviors, the consequences of these behaviors, the motivators behind behaviors. Like, you're not a mom, what, and you're saying how, like, you can't fully relate to what the parents are going through. Why would you go into a field like this? What are the factors and the habits, and why is Enass in a field like this?
When I first stumbled on this field, it was by accident. I first got my degree in psychology, and I'm sure there's not much to do with a degree in psychology, my bachelor's degree. And I started looking up what I can do. I've always loved kids. From a young age, I was always the one who was playing with the younger cousins and, helping with the babies. I've always loved kids. So looking up what can I do with a degree in psychology, behavior technician just kept coming up. ABA therapy. At the time, I had no idea what autism was. This was 9 years ago, we're talking. No idea what autism was, what a behavior technician did, but I just knew this was a position where I could work with kids. And I was like, why not? Let me try it. And I started off working as a behavior technician at a big center. I was assigned 2 cases. One was a 14-year-old boy. I'm sorry, he was 12-year-old boy, and the other was a 4-year-old boy. Both completely different, both having, very severe behaviors of their own. And I came into it not knowing what to expect, but knowing, like, okay, I'm going to hang out with this, 12-year-old and then this 4-year-old separate times of the day. And, let me see what this job, entails. And I don't know how to explain it to you. I truly fell in love with it. Like, I spent time with these kids. I worked on the programs that their BCBAs, which is a board certified behavior analyst, what they wrote out for them. And just realizing the direct impact that the work I did with them had on their lives and their families' lives, it was such a rewarding feeling. It's so humbling knowing, like, how much I can help and, wanting to do this type of work. So I told myself, like, I love this. I love the feeling that I get when, like, my client reaches their goal, and I want to have that feeling forever. So I pushed myself to go back and get my master's. And then I became a BCBA, which is the board certified behavior analyst, so that I can work with more kids. Because as a BCBA, you get a caseload of kids versus just the 2 clients that you work with. And when I had a caseload of kids, I got that same feeling times 100, because now I have 8 kids. I'm the one that's, directly responsible for what the technicians are working on with the kids. I'm overseeing that work, and I get to see that direct impact on the families' lives, and just seeing the appreciation from the families, and, starting to understand too, like we said, I'm not a mom yet, but, starting to understand the relationship that the parent has with the child and how they want to help them succeed and achieve their goals, and helping them get there. It's a feeling that I can't even put into words. But this job definitely isn't for everybody. And I say that for everyone that asks me. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of, thinking outside the box and looking at the bigger picture, like we talked about earlier when we started the interview. Looking at the bigger picture, like, okay, where is our end goal? And then now we need to break up what the small steps are to achieve that end goal and be patient enough to get there. I think I told you earlier, I have no regrets. I truly love what I do. And I say alhamdulillah 1,000 times because I'm at a point now where like I'm able to help so many families. And I feel like this was my calling. This was what I was meant to do in this world.
Was that, let's translate it into like behavioral terms, was that fulfillment like your amanam?
Yes.
Basically?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And it's what keeps me going. And I'm not telling you every day is, all peachy and every day is an M&M day. No, but we have to appreciate those days because that gets us to our end goal.
What's one thing that we didn't talk about today that you think we should have?
Why don't we talk about community support? I told you before we started how, I hear from a lot of people like, oh, this person opened up a center and this person opened up a center. And I feel like as a community, we need to do better in like accepting that like it's okay and, supporting one another and there's knowing that there's room for everyone to succeed. I think what sparked me saying this is recently a lot of people have been telling me again, this person opened up a center and this person opened up a center. And I say that's wonderful. There's so many families that need help and it's impossible to help everyone. It's impossible for one center to be able to help all the families in need.
The need is that much.
The need is that much. That like, as much as I tell you you still wouldn't believe it. The need truly is that much. And in order for like me to have that effective change on the kids that I am helping, I'm not able to like, I can't help like 100 kids at once, for example. Right now we're a small team of, I have about 15 kids, with those that we're starting, not even those that are already with us. Those that we're starting, we have about 15 kids, but there's so much that goes into it and so much detail that you need to keep track of for each child's goals that, taking on 100 kids at once literally would be madness. I wouldn't be able to do that. But yeah, so I keep hearing about like new centers that open up and I'm happy about it because yes, we need more. Like Dearborn definitely needs more, but I don't like when they try to mess with one another. So there's a center that tried to recruit all of my employees. And that I think we need to do better as a community.
Help more people without stepping on each other's toes, basically.
Exactly. We can come together and for the bigger picture. We're all here for one goal. Like everyone wants to do good, which is wonderful. But I just wish that there was more people that want to see others doing good.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Enass. This was a fantastic conversation.
I agree. Thank you.